Welcome, everybody, to another edition of ALN Thursday at 3. My name is Mike Bordenaro. I'm the Executive Director of the Asset Leadership Network, and we're very excited to be talking with Brandon Kriner, Director of CGI, today about a white paper that we have co-published on the very obvious but important issue of connecting financial reporting with asset management. And we'll be getting to Brandon in just a bit, but first we'd like to thank our sponsors and tell you what's coming up. Our ALN Platinum member, Onuma Inc., and our ALN patron members, Definitive Logic, a man tech company, ABS Quality Evaluations, CGI, and Jacobs. We're very appreciative of their contributions and the contributions of all of our organizational members. We wouldn't be able to bring you these types of programs without support. So we're very appreciative of that. And these types of programs are growing. We've got quite a bit coming up. We've got an ALN AI brainstorm, tree storm on October 19th. And I just found out today that Amelia Secoy from the previously with the U.S. Government Accountability Office is going to be with us on October 12th talking about trees and the importance of trees as a setup to that. And then Jennifer Mims from Jacobs has helped us start the ALN Airports Asset Leadership Board. And we're going to do a little preview and talk about that. And then on the 9th, her co-chair from the Denver Airport is the director of asset management there, Brian. And I'm sorry, Brian, I forget your last name right now. But we'll be having that on the 9th. And just a little bit of congratulations. We had an AI port storm in August, and it focused on artificial intelligence and digital twins with asset management governance, and a global leader in ports, which owns or operates 50 ports around the world, is having our team present to them. They're having a 3-day event in October on artificial intelligence and digital twins in ports, and the presentation, the recordings, everything they've seen from us is right spot on with them. So we're very happy about that. So that is the gist there. So why don't we bring on Brandon? And today Jim Dieter is going to be co-facilitating this discussion. And Jim, welcome, both of you. Brandon, thank you for joining us again. And will you start off a little bit about your background? You don't have to go too much about how you and Jim shared a cubicle or anything like that, but a little bit about your background.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mike, and thanks for having me back. I've been in asset management in one form or another my whole career, some of it in the private sector, some of it in the government sector, and most recently here with CGI Federal, where we work with federal agencies as an IT consulting and managed service provider. And of course, one of the things we do is consulting and software solutions around asset management. So I always love talking about asset management, and this is no different. I was listening to your introduction, and there's just so many cool things that we get to talk about in the world of asset management. You're talking about trees and AI, and I'd much rather be talking about trees and AI today than financial reporting, but
well, we can talk about financial reporting of trees, because one of the things I've learned is the U.S. Department of Navy owns a forest of white oak in Indiana, because they need to maintain the specific tree type so that the U.S. Constitution can stay in ship shape. And they were running out of white oak forest, and they said, wait a second, and they did that. So there's plenty of tree asset management that we can talk about, and there's huge financial implications. One of the things that we have found, and it was really driven home by DC government, is that finances, the CFO, is so critical to all of this. So can you tell us why you thought it was important for us to co-publish a paper on asset management and finance?
Yeah, I think this is a topic that's been vexing a lot of agencies for many years. Like you said, it does seem a little bit obvious. That doesn't seem to be necessarily driving folks towards solutions because it's difficult, right? There's a difference between knowing that something is important, knowing it should be done, versus being able to do it effectively. And the irony is not lost on me that here we are at the very end of the government fiscal year when a lot of people are dealing with financial reporting right now, and so this is a very timely topic, right? So the disconnect between the financial statements and the physical reality of assets is a recurring theme and a problem. And there are several agencies out there that have struggled to get clean audit opinions, have material weaknesses, in part because of this issue, right? What assets do we have? What are they worth? Where are they? If you don't have a connection between your physical asset register, ledger, or whatever it is, to your financial system, your balance sheet's going to be off. You're not going to be able to accurately report your property, plant, and equipment balance. And so there's issues with CFO Act there. There's issues with just transparency and accountability to taxpayers. So it's a very important issue.
And what have you seen in terms of successful approaches? What does that look like?
Well, successful approach starts with communication between these two organizations, right? So a lot of times the financial people, the CFO shop, and the asset management group are totally disconnected in the organization. The asset management group might be in the facilities organization or in the Office of Administration, or sometimes up under contracts and procurement. And so there's often just these organizational silos that prevent this ongoing exchange of information. And there's a lot of sort of fire drills of, oh my gosh, I need this data, hurry up and send me this so I can reconcile these reports. So the solution I've seen in people being successful is to actually develop integration between financial management, ERP systems, software, and their physical asset management system of record, so that that information is flowing seamlessly as things happen to the assets in the physical realm that result in financial transactions. Those are automatically passed back to the general ledger.
Jim, I see you nodding your head a lot. Is this familiar territory for you?
Oh yeah, and it's remarkable, the federal government and their approach to assets. So just quick story. I'm talking to my brother the other night over a happy hour drink, and he's a long retired golf course superintendent. He didn't know anything about asset management, particularly, besides the fact that he was managing an asset for his whole life. But we were talking about the federal government, and we don't usually talk about politics, but about the budget, and more so about the deficit. And he was saying, deficit, that's a crazy concept, because they never count the assets. They only count the deficit. They don't, what we owe. They don't count what we have. That's just crazy. And I'm like, wow, maybe people are starting to get this, So, maybe there's hope, and then it, flows back from a macro sense to the operational perspective of, just connecting the budget for things for what they're actually associated with is kind of ultimately what we're talking about. But that's often, or just isn't the case, I guess, typically in the federal government.
So again, Brandon, what do you see? I think this is really a leadership issue. When you see the successes, what does the leader look like?
Well, the leader recognizes that these two things are not disconnected and that they are in fact connected. And a lot of it is driven by a desire to comply with regulations or to remediate material weaknesses or findings. So a lot of times it starts with what I'll call a severe emotional event in terms of an audit finding or a GAO report or some internal OIG, Office of Inspector General finding that says, hey, we need to do better about this. So I think a lot of times too, for the purposes of financial and maybe particularly contracting and procurement shops, it's, well, we're focused on acquiring the stuff, right? We're focused on the budget to have the money. We're focused on the competition, the services, the receiving, and then the stuff comes into active use, and it's like, okay, well, it goes off into the hands of whoever's using it, and that's sort of a lot of times the end of the visibility, right? So it's a recognition that it's more than that. And, I think that's very much encompassed in the ISO 55000 standard philosophy, that there needs to be a top management view and visibility and support of this entire asset lifecycle. So, for example, let's say that there is a vehicle that's purchased and capitalized, and it's got, I don't know, a 5-year useful life. In year 2, somebody crashes it, right? It gets totaled, and we need to write that off. Well, somebody may, deal with the damage and the write-off and all the issue in the physical asset management system. If that data doesn't make it back to the financial system, then we're going to keep right on depreciating this asset until potentially years later, when somebody goes, oh, wait a minute, no, that got destroyed, 2 or 3 years ago, and we may need to go back and do, correcting journal entries and things like that. So that's just one really small example. But if you think about that on the scale of the money that our government operates in, we could potentially be not accurately accounting for millions of dollars or more of assets, or we're tracking things that we don't even have anymore, right? Because of one reason or another. And I like to say, assets are never lost. It's that records aren't maintained. And so this is why that data is very important. And sometimes you read these stories in the media of, oh my God, like DOD lost an aircraft, right? Well, no, they didn't. Like, it's somewhere. It didn't disappear into a black hole. There were, record keeping issues. So being able to link that is very important.
So I'm going to show the paper, and Brandon, if you could talk about what you thought was important in establishing. I love the title, The Vital Connection. That is so good. Physical asset management and financial reporting for federal agency leaders. I really like how we're really targeted on this. And then the executive we're not going to read everything, just it gets straight to the point. People know immediately why they need this. And then let me make this a little bigger so that we can see basically the contents. And you wanted to keep it simple and to the point. What were some of the points that you wanted to make here?
Well, we've already spoken about the accuracy of financial reporting and compliance and why that's important. I think the other key thing is the budget allocation and decision making. So if we don't understand what we have, we don't understand what's available for us to use, and then we might be making unnecessary purchases of things that are already available. And I know that the GSA, the General Services Administration, does an excellent job of reutilizing government-owned property throughout the government. However, that all depends on having a record and knowing what's out there and what's available in the first place. So there's a potential for significant cost savings. There's a potential for better reutilization of assets between agencies, and ultimately saving taxpayer dollars or making the appropriations that have been made available for other spending priorities, because I'm sure every agency has a list of priorities of things they'd like to acquire that is way longer than the appropriation will accommodate. So I think that's very important as well.
Brandon, we both have a deep background in personal property management, and we've seen over the years, and we talked about it at our ALN events that actually the gross dollars that the government has invested in personal property exceeds what they have in real property. And, they're starting now to think about getting their hands around that with the National Academies report and all. So I know the Sunflower software addresses both of those things. Can you talk a little bit about how you see that play out in federal agencies?
Yeah, that's a great point. And certainly real property is very important, and especially in this current model of hybrid workspaces and people working remotely. And of course, every large organization dealing with real property is grappling with this, but the federal government's not alone. We have all this space. What do we do with it, right? So if we need less space, can we consolidate? Can we get out of some leases and move some people and some agencies in shared space? So, that dovetails in the same way. There may be things that have happened to leases may have expired, so we need to stop amortizing them. We may be able to consolidate and reutilize some assets there. Maybe there's some owned properties that are available for reuse. So that concept's very important. But in terms of connecting that to the personal property, I'd like to think of it as really about the entire asset portfolio. At the highest level in financial reporting, property, plant, and equipment is the line on the balance sheet, right? So that encompasses all of that. So that's very much a part of what do we have. And there's, for example, the real property accounting standards are shifting as well. There's a standard about to go into effect, SFAS 54, Statement of Federal Financial Accounting, that is going to require operating leases to be tracked as capital leases and amortized there. So that's going to even bring more visibility to things that may not have been in the financial system into those and tracked as assets.
When does that come into effect, Brandon?
October 1st, 2023.
If we have a government.
If we haven't descended into anarchy and chaos by then. Yeah, it's been something that's been rolled out for many years, and the implementation deadline is starting in FY24. So agencies are working to re-engineer their processes, in some cases re-engineer their systems to be able to handle those operating leases as capital leases.
Can you share any of the background, or you have any insight into what led to that and what the implications are?
I'm not sure what the original genesis of it was, other than to say that things were being treated as expenses that really were more capital in nature as far as the volume and the size of these leases. So I think it's a effort to better financially account for the actual expenditures that the government has, right? So even the lease itself is you've got an asset and a liability there. You've got an expense and a liability rather, and so those are going to be capitalized and tracked that way. But I'm not sure of the absolute origin of it.
Okay, that's gonna.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mark. You can wait.
No, that was good about what Art was saying.
Yeah, just about the difference between people think that they're doing an asset management and people actually doing asset management. That's a good broad topic. You got any thoughts on that from your perspective?
Well, so I didn't see the comment, but so let me go back and look. Okay, CFOs are under the impression that their organizations are practicing asset management because that's what they're told without knowing what it really is. Yeah, and I think I would maybe take a little different spin on that and say that asset management has so many dimensions and facets to it that it is not possible for any one organization and any one part of an organization to just do all of asset management. You've got facilities, you've got people who are using assets, you've got people who are buying assets and disposing of assets and accounting for assets. So it really does take that village. And if you don't have your systems integrated to provide that comprehensive view of the asset portfolio, you're not going to be able to connect all those dots. We haven't even gotten into, for example, the operating expenses associated with assets, right? So we may have things that are not on our books that we're not keeping track of, and we're paying money to maintain and use those things that we're not necessarily accounting for and associating with those assets either. So it is really all linked together, and I think that I think it's just a challenge, but I do think that technology can help significantly improve the fidelity of the data that we have.
So that leads perfectly into this second section, which is future strategies for success. And you have suggestions on contract procurement and financial management. You want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, so obviously it starts when we buy these things and procure these things, right? So one of the things that is important is to actually integrate the procurement systems with the asset management system, so that as assets are acquired, as they come in, as they're received, that purchasing information is transmitted to the asset management record, the physical record, and stays with that and serves as the basis for capitalizing, depreciating, amortizing, what have you. So it starts at the very beginning, right? So asset management is typically not involved in the budgeting process, the acquisitions process in terms of planning and all that stuff. But then once that stuff comes in, a lot of times we hear asset managers talk about, I don't know where this stuff came, it just showed up on the dock, right? The proverbial surprise, pallet of stuff. And probably starting soon here in a couple of weeks after all the last minute year-end purchases start coming in, right? So if you can already know, hey, we've got this thing due in, I'm going to bring it in and actually convert it to physical asset records. So for example, let's say you have a purchase order line item that's one line item for 100 laptops, right? Well, that's going to come in the purchasing system and just say, well, it's 100 laptops for $1 million. And when you bring that into the asset management system, you can actually allocate that into the individual assets, create those physical accountability records. I realize a laptop's not likely to be capitalized, and then at that point, start capitalizing and doing the journal entries and the depreciation that keeps it all in sync. So that's where it's really important to link up on the contracts and procurement side. And on that physical asset record, you should be able to look back into that record's history and get all the way back to the budget and the acquisition information that was, all the way back in this asset's history. And then looking forward into the future, you can get to the ultimate disposal of the asset, which the details and mechanics of which are often happening in the physical asset management system. So maybe there's excess screening, and there's redeployment, and there's disposal processes and approvals. Things are lost and disposed of as a result of reports of survey, right? So at the end of the asset's life cycle, you should be able to look in that record and see all the way back to the beginning, to the original purchasing details, right? And that is what true financial visibility looks like, in my opinion.
And then the people who are managing the assets are able to look at that also and basically validate the information from two different directions.
Sure, and this really helps too in an audit situation, right? You've got that complete traceability and that data trail, and you don't have to run around looking at multiple sources and trying to figure out, well, this is really this, and this was connected there. So it really provides that link that I think is very important.
So, Brandon, you might not know Art Curlin, but
I do know Art.
Okay. Well, he's got so much commenting that I'm having him join to talk with you directly, because his little comments are not quite enough, I don't think. Although he does warn us ahead of time that he's down in the facilities department. It might be a little noisy.
Perfect. Hey, Art.
Oh, we can't hear you, Art. No sound, unfortunately. That is sometimes the case. So what was your passion for writing the paper?
Well, I see this issue come up again and again with the federal agencies that our company works with and supports, and I think that sometimes there's a perception that this problem is just too big to solve. And as an information technology company, that is what we do, right? We come up with innovative IT solutions to help federal agencies run more smoothly. So seemed like a message that I wanted to get out there to let people know that there are ways to connect these links in a way that is repeatable and automated and doesn't involve, massive procedural sea changes in what people are doing. The ideal situation is you keep doing what you're doing, you keep focusing what you're focused on, and let the software systems exchange the data to give you what you need. Working smarter, not harder.
That's what Art has set up, right, Art? No, we're still not able to hear you, Art. I'm sorry. But thank you for your comments. We know that Art has been wrestling with the monster that you have been talking about, Brandon, and he's a good additional success story in addition to the successes you have with your federal clients.
It would be very interesting to hear, sort of firsthand from people who have lived through this from the federal side. And this issue isn't just limited to federal agencies. I'm sure that state agencies have this challenge. Anybody that has assets and money probably has this challenge, once you get to a certain scale. So it would be interesting to hear some people, firsthand journeys with this as well.
It really is an interesting scalable problem, or problem that's about scale, is that, back to the real property and personal property, the personal property has often been overlooked because it's easier to talk to people about $1 million building than it is, 100 PCs that are worth $1 million. But both are still $1 million. And the chances are you're turning the PCs every 3 years, and the building every 30 years. So actually the problem is 10 times bigger than that. Interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in some cases, I don't want to pick on anybody in particular, but, some of the very largest agencies, to your point, the quantity of personal property that's out there is staggering, right? Department of Defense is probably the biggest example, where billions of dollars of personal property assets out in the hands of the industrial base, and a lot of energy and effort is expended on exchanging that data between the industrial base and DoD, and trying to get a handle on what's out there, what it's worth, right? And so that's an ongoing challenge that I know the department is addressing through the FIRE initiative, and it's a big deal. So you're right, it's not always that the personal property is trivial.
I just want to go back for a minute to, which is something you said just a minute ago, and I think it's maybe a message we don't send enough, is doing good asset management should be cheaper and easier, and just be a win for everybody, rather than being an expense.
And it should start from the CFO office, right, Art?
Absolutely.
There he is.
We're talking to a certified accountant, so of course he's going to say that. But Art's also the head of the asset management department in University Health, and it is in the CFO department.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny because I was talking to somebody I know at the VA. We're connected via Skybridge, and I was asking about their asset management program, and the person, kind of like what I said in my comment, they said, "Oh yeah, we do asset management. Our logistics department handles that." And I was just kind of like inside shaking my head.
It's much more than logistics, right, Brandon?
Yeah, it means so many different things to so many different people, and that's the challenge, right? It's not like just sort of one thing everyone points at and says, oh, that's exactly what it says on the tin, as the British might say, right? So a lot of facets to it.
Yeah, my feeling is if logistics is doing asset management, they're not 100% focused on logistics, and vice versa.
And that's why it's a leadership issue, actually. I'm so
Absolutely.
glad Jim set up the Asset Leadership Network. And Brandon, what can leaders do to force the marriage?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think first of all, it's bringing the leaders of the respective financial and asset management shops together and working on, consolidating these processes and creating, deciding the path to create these software integrations. This isn't a problem that's going to be solved by working harder, right? You can throw as many people as you want at this. That's not the answer. The answer is using technology and using tools to to further integrate this. So I think there's just got to be the willingness to fund and support projects like that to get those integrations off the ground. And they're often not trivial activities, right? They're often activities that take a year or more and involve really looking into the business processes end to end from both groups. And there tends to be a lot of discovery and, oh, we thought you were doing that. No, we thought you were doing that, right? So it's not magic, but once it's in place, it's really efficient and really saves a lot of time.
Art, you have any comments on that?
No, that's 100% true. I mean, as you know, Mike, I mean, it's the level of support is a direct relation to how quickly you can put something into place. So, with top level support, you could do it relatively quickly. If you don't have that, you're probably not going to be able to do it at all. So, or it's going to be a struggle to do. So getting that leadership support is definitely key. And it's something, that can be born out of the, frontline levels, like as in my case, where you just do a few things to, you take care of the low-hanging fruit, you show what asset management is, what it can do, and then you approach senior leadership and say, hey, this is what I was able to do on my own. Imagine what we can do together.
And they might ignore you, and then you'll have a severe emotional event, and then they'll be kicking down your door to do this, right? And honestly, I mean, that's the way a lot of human nature is, right? Like, the necessity is the mother of invention. But yeah, if organizations can be so proactive as to do this, without something like that happening, so much the better.
Yeah, excellent. And one of the things that's great about this network, Art being able to jump in with direct experience, is we are able to keep these important discussions going. And on October 26th, we're going to have a special ALN Thursday at 3. It's going to be an hour-long panel. We'll be wrapping up here shortly for those of you who only allocated a half hour. And we'll be having this type of discussion with federal executives and Brandon, and we'll bring some ALN senior fellows and experts in on that too. So look forward to this ongoing discussion. Art, thanks for joining us. Brandon, thank you for, getting us going on this paper. It's something that Jim Dieter has basically been saying for a long time, and it's so good to have it in a co-published white paper. So
Great. Thanks so much.
thank you. Thank you all. And thanks to the audience. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for
All
having
right.
me.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Bye for now.